Hello friends, my name is RagePanda1 and yes, I did just get out of the shower, that's why my hair looks exactly like this. But hey, stay tuned for the rest of the video so you can watch it slowly dry over time? I don't know. Today we're going to be tackling the Shaman leveling guide from Maxroll.gg and I'm excited for it, kind of. Except that I've already did this build in the middle of the Druid build. It was pretty much exactly the same thing. So I know that it's going to be good, there's that, but I also just kind of already did it. But the good news is in the last video we didn't cover that much of that build because in the Druid guide there was 4 different builds that we went through, respecing all the time. This one is a little more simple. Once we can be in Spriggan form and be effective in it, we're switching to that and sticking with that for the entirety of the guide. So I am looking forward to that, and when it comes to Monolith time, when I get to put whatever I have in my box on my character, I have a lot of things that are good for Spriggan form, and that might be fun. So why in the world would I want to play the Shaman leveling guide to begin with? Well, the interesting thing is that we're using almost exclusively things from the Druid tree to use our Shaman leveling guide. So that's a little weird. It's meant to be very easy to play and easy to gear with consistent damage, but it also says it has a weak early campaign. Not looking forward to that, but hey, we're experienced gamers around here and we can handle it. And once we get into Spriggan form, we will be very low on mobility, but I think we've got some answers for that when it comes to Monolith time. We do need to focus a little bit on the early setup in this one. We're going to be using Swipe to generate bleeds, which means we're going to want physical damage and extra chance to bleed wherever we can get it. That's always good. That does a really good job in the early campaign, so I'm not upset about that in the slightest. But when we eventually make it into Spriggan form, we are just going to be summoning Stormcrows, summoning a Spriggan, and we're going to be summoning our healing totems, which will throw poison thorns, and that's how we're doing all of our damage. That's the whole thing that we're doing. Moving and summoning totems. So it worked out pretty effectively for clearing campaign the last time. I didn't try it that much in Monoliths, and we'll just see how that works out. I imagine it's going to be a middle-of-the-road build. And one thing that's going to help us a lot if we can find it in the early game is to get a nice big two-handed weapon that has damage over time on it. Physical damage is nice too. Damage over time is huge because we're going to be trying to go for ignites as well as bleeds. And, of course, on our suffixes, we want chance to ignite and chance to bleed. You're going to notice that's a consistent thing in the early game. And while not all of these guides are the single best thing you can do in the early parts of leveling, I do think that going for bleeds and ignites in the early game is pretty much one of the best things that you can do. In fact, if you've got a fire starter torch that you can put on that does spreading flames, good golly Miss Molly, you're going to have a quick time with the beginning of the campaign. I only wish that I could be doing that in these guides. Otherwise, you know, it would be a little bit too fast and people wouldn't get a good idea if I did that, so I can't do that. Now, I do have the Itera's Path boots already, and when they become available, I'm going to put them on because it is part of the guide to try your best to get those boots. They're very clear about that, and I am going to use that when I can. And it's possible that I'll put on this other unique that they want me to use. If I wanted to, I could be putting on all of these. I really could. But since this Tears of the Forest gives me a little bit of extra movement speed, I might be considering putting that on, and it also gives me rage per vine that I have summoned, and it just keeps the build flowing and saves me time. It's not necessary. It doesn't change how the build works. It just makes it smoother to play, so I might allow myself that luxury. We'll be almost at Monolith time before that matters anyway, though. So now I'm going to jump in and I'm going to get through the early parts and to get something of a build going, and I'm just going to walk up to all these enemies and swipe their butts until they bleed. Apologies. It is worth mentioning that for this particular fellow, we do have our little wolf here, and he's going to help us get some early levels by killing everything as we walk by. That's always a benefit of these pet classes. You don't have to do anything at all. You just keep moving. I got very lucky with crafting my starter weapon. We have here a bastard sword with damage over time, physical damage, chance to bleed, and chance to ignite. Everything we ever wanted, so I'm looking forward to a good start. Well, since I have decent gear, I think I'll see what we can do on this boss fight here. Let's just see. Those bleeds and ignites are starting to act up already. They're starting to get him already. I feel like we're at a point now where I can showcase exactly what you're doing in the early game. And that, of course, is we're pressing swipe. But when we see this big guy, then we're going to summon our totems. And we swipe him down as much as we can. Once again, we're running bleeds, and we're running damage over time in general, so we don't have to stay in there for the very last attack. We can let him rot down and that's going to save us a lot of time throughout the course of the entire campaign. If we're trying to finish everybody with a last hit, we're going to be wasting a whole lot of time. So this is all that this intro build is. It's not going to be any different until I get into Spriggan form, so you know how we roll. I'll see you at that point. Well, I've discovered what they mean by having a weak early game, and that is that swipe falls off pretty hard as we get into this later portion before we're in Spriggan form, and it does not feel good at all. Unfortunately, the best weapons that we have available are very slow, and having high attack speed makes bleed builds a lot better because pretty quickly more stacks becomes more important than bonus damage, and it just ain't working out because we're putting our points into spell damage right now and attunement. They should have just respect. They should have just made the spec good now and then respec when you get the points later that you need in Spriggan form. There was no reason for this. This is suffering for no reason at all. The classic fight with the old lightning boy. Now what I like to do is I like to get my thorn totems out, because the healing totems are separate even though you can have the same amount of them. And then it just helps a little bit. The problem right now is that I can't stay in my actual Spriggan form very long, and I end up being swapped out, which is annoying, but it does let me get my thorn totems up again, so I don't know, it's a bit of a give and take. It's just not... There's something about that I don't like. I would rather just be in Spriggan form the entire time, and that is possible through the use of uniques, which I'm not going to put on yet. But later in the video, we are going to put on all of the uniques and just see what we can do. So, I actually, now that we're in Spriggan form and we're using our spell stuff, it's a lot better. I need to switch off this weapon, obviously. It's still my old one. I haven't been back to town since, but something else that's going to give me a little bit of spell damage is going to be a lot better because my thorn totems scale off of spell, and so do the healing totems when I'm in Spriggan form. So we've gone to our gambler to replace that weapon, and I misspoke. I said spell damage. I meant minion spell damage. That's important. Minion spell damage. But we want these bearded axes, and one of my issues always with these leveling guides is that this bearded axe completely changes my build and is very important to the success going forward because I can craft on the things that I actually need, like the minion spell damage, in 2 different slots in the suffix, and they also want me to have some mana regen if I can. But they don't tell me that I can get this axe at level 21. That would be super important to know. Everybody could use that information. In this one, you're probably going to be at that point by the time you can get it anyway, but you want to be able to know when you can go to the gambler and get the upgrade that you're going to need to be able to craft all of the stuff on for your new weapon. Your weapon is, I get it, maybe they're not going to do every single item that comes out, right? But your weapon is very important, and I think they should be very specific about when you're switching those things. What we ended up here was a bearded axe that comes with 48% increased minion damage, which is of course great. We've got a little bit of mana and mana regen, and we've got a minion spell and bow damage affix on there. It's not perfect. It's not everything they wanted us to have. The melee lightning damage is not going to matter really. The stun chance is not going to be that big of a deal either. And you're never going to get the perfect thing, especially when you're just grinding through campaign. So get what you can get and don't throw a fit and just get out there and kill some monsters, would you please? The build is definitely not at full power right now, but I will say that if I want to be getting as much experience as possible, I gotta hang around my totems a little bit. I can't just keep pushing forward and doing what I gotta do. So that feels a little bit bad. It could be because my weapon is not as good as it could be. I'm not getting all the minion bonus damage. I do have minion damage on my rings, both of them, but not many other places. I don't think anywhere else on my gear. So that might be holding me back a little bit as well. But it does feel a little bit not great. A little bit slow. What are you going to do? It is what it is. We just got to keep waiting, keep grinding, and getting more points in, and then it'll feel a lot better. But even on the boss here, I mean, yes, I can sit here and do my basic attack, and it adds some extra damage. But it ain't that much. It is not that much. Luckily, we're able to stay in our form a little bit longer now, so it works out a little bit better that way, but still, I wish that I could stay in it forever, you know? We'll get there. We will get there. In our last video for the Sorcerer, this fight was not a great time because it took forever to do. But if I get up all of my totems and I get up all of my vines and I start shooting, I pretty much am wrecking things at this point. So for single target, this one is doing extremely well already, and it still has more to be able to gain. However, for clear, you're not building up poison stacks quite as much, and you just leave a lot of mobs on the table if you keep moving as fast as you can possibly move, which is what I like to do. I think that it's fine. It's a good balance. They say that it's low mobility. If you do keep moving like I'm moving, then you can usually stay with the quest level as much as you possibly need to, but when it comes down to farming for a little extra XP, it might be a little slow and boring, but it makes up for it a lot by having these single target situations go really, really fast, and that is definitely a benefit. It's one of the harder things to get from a leveling guide because they're so focused on the AoE clear. So I think we've got a good balance so far on this one, but I'm still looking for a little bit more. I have discovered something that is a huge flaw in the guide. A huge flaw. And that is that if you're resummoning your totems, you get to just get rage back for free. But you have to have the energy to summon them in the first place. So that's something. That is certainly something. But if I go into Spriggan form and I summon my little totems here, and we'll just stand around and waste a little rage. If I keep summoning, if I'm spamming this button, that rage is going all the way back to full. They don't mention that in the guide. Anywhere. You can, whenever you're in a fight, you can stay in rage forever. I mean, I guess you don't even have to be in a fight. You could just keep spamming this button as you walk, and you'll keep getting it back. And that really helps a lot when you are in a fight. If you're in a boss fight and you want to stay in your Spriggan form, just keep spamming those totems, and it's going to do the thing for you. We've just hit level 30, which means that we're about to put on some uniques to make the build sing, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But first, I just want to show you the old Admiral Hearten fight, which is super easy on this build because we've got our single target damage, and we like that a lot. We like it when this fight is easy. And we like it when it's fast too. It might not seem fast if you've never seen the fight before, but I assure you, it's kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal how fast that's going, and it's all thanks to the poison stacks. So the legendaries that I actually put on are Itera's Path, which gives us a bunch of health, and our minions and we move faster. Increased effectiveness of the healing from the healing totems, which is great. And if I'm moving, I have a chance to summon vines, and that's really the only reason that I care about these boots at all. I'm getting my vines summoned for free while I'm moving, and that works well with this necklace up here, which gives me minion damage implicit, bonus to Spriggan form, and to my summon Spriggan, but we get a couple of rage gained per second per summoned vine. And the effect of having both of these equipped on this build is that I just always have max rage as long as I'm moving. If I stop moving, I stop summoning vines for free, and then it can dwindle down and get out of my control in a moment or two, but as long as I keep moving, then I'm good to go. This also is going to give me increased movement speed while I'm transformed, and that's going to help a lot because between the two of these, I'll have actually a reasonable amount of movement speed, and the fact that I don't have a dash won't matter. I also have this Veil Root body armor that I can put on. I haven't put it on yet, but by the time we get into Monoliths, it's something that I'm going to throw on to get a bonus to my Spriggan form, as well as extra spell physical damage. Not that that matters all that much for me. This is something that's just going to be a nice chess piece until I get into some better purple that I have available. I don't think this is particularly good for this build, but I happen to have it laying around, and it will be useful when I start going into Monoliths. You may have noticed I have this belt on as well. This is just something I found while leveling, and it gives me some extra potion slots, but it's not very good right now. It could be a whole lot better, and I probably will be replacing that as soon as I can get something nice that fits in that slot, and I definitely will need to for resistances anyway. It's just nice to have a bunch of extra potions. I've been using it since the beginning of the game, and it has helped a little bit when I'm in some dicey situations. So that's where we stand for now. And to see the effectiveness, I just go into my Spriggan form here. I'm going to walk past the big guy. Ain't nobody got time for that. But you can see I'm dropping vines, and my rage is just staying full. Just absolutely staying full. And now that I have a little more minion damage going on, I am getting a lot of kills instead of just walking past and nothing quite dies yet. This is working out pretty well, So what I really need to do is I need to get another level, and then I need to get 2 turquoise rings. and I need to get my resistances fixed. And by that point, I would already be ready to go into Monoliths, but of course, I'm going to finish this act like I always do and get to the Oracle's Abode. And then we'll go back and do the Sapphire Tablet and get all the normal stuff that we do. But I have a feeling that this one is going to perform very well when we get into Monoliths. And in fact, it already is performing very well, both on single target and when I'm fighting other people. The crazy thing, though, is that it has nothing to do with being a shaman at all. This is just being a random primalist build, but what are you gonna do? In our first monolith here, we are actually lower level than normal at only 34, and I think that's because the totems weren't killing quite as many things along the way as I would normally kill. It's fine, I was barely lower level than I was before, and I got to walk through the campaign and never stop, so that wasn't too much of a loss. When it comes to actually clearing the monolith, it's pretty decently fast, and it's killing the things relatively nicely, until we get to the boss. And then it's really, really lacking a lot. A lot. At this point on the Druid build, we had switched into Swarmblade mode, and we were absolutely crushing with that, and it was very easy, and I can tell why they switched, because at this point, that feels bad. And I have some pretty decent gear that's adding Dominion damage now. I haven't gotten to fully fix everything yet, but we need a couple more levels before we can get everything that will help a lot with that. But I'm really hoping that we find a way to increase the damage that we're putting out, because right now, if every boss is going to be that slow, yikes, that's going to be a problem. I have decided I'm taking over this corner of this arena, and that's the way it's going to be. Can't nobody get in here to do nothing. I mean, this is sort of a thing that this build is really good at, just area denial. And I gotta say that the healing totems do a considerable amount of healing, and they seem to top me up after every single time that I take any real damage. And I feel real safe. I'm quite underleveled for what I normally would be, and I'm gonna just go into the quests, and I'm gonna finish the boss at this level, because it's all so easy. It is very easy. Killing single targets is a little bit slow, but not painfully slow. Overall, I think this is a pretty stellar build for what it actually is trying to accomplish, I must say. We're finally here at the ending quests for this first monolith, and this is the lowest level I have ever been going into here, and I felt more comfortable and more safe than I have on most of the other builds. The reason for that is because the healing totems do an incredible amount of healing, and you just are naturally very tanky because of the build. Just by being in Spriggan form and having totems summoned, you're getting all sorts of extra defenses that you normally would not have had. So you take hits pretty well, and you heal back up from them almost instantly because of your totems. Now we also have to summon our little salad fronds on the ground, these little creeping vines, and they really help a lot when you're in single target, and in fact, they made the boss look absolutely trivial, which was one thing I really enjoyed, because when you're on a melee build on the last boss of this monolith, it's very annoying. The fight is just not very fun. So it was a pleasure to do that fight as this build as well, and I just feel like it would scale well into the end game. If you're looking for the sort of build where you can just pick it up and play and have a good time from the beginning until the end game, I think this is one of the really good ones. It's unfortunately not really a shaman at all. It's just a generic primalist. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but if you're looking to play a shaman, this is not one of those. This is the primalist leveling guide, because you can be any sort of person and still have it work out. You do get minor buffs from having some totems out, but really nothing that changes the build in any meaningful way. We never actually spec'd into our Itera's Blessing, but that's fine. Number one, I play on a controller, as a lot of you know, so that move is all but useless to me because it's impossible to target. You can make it so it casts directly on you, but still, it didn't really matter. It's a healing move that we don't really need in the first place, and it's just sort of a placeholder because they didn't need another skill in the build. I don't think it's the best build that I've ever played in my life. It's certainly not the highest performing build that I've ever played in my life. In fact, that build is, of course, the blast knife build, as I've started calling it, but Rax calls it the detonating arrow build. I think that's a bit of a misnomer because that's so many... There's a million other builds that are detonating arrow. The thing that makes this specifically a unique build are the daggers. We should probably refer to it as the blast knife build. That one is completely broken, absolutely insane. This build that I'm playing now with the Spriggan form is not absolutely broken. The uniques that I've added in are not absolutely broken. They're not even necessary. They're nice for quality of life. They make it so you don't have to try very hard to stay in Spriggan form at all. As long as you're moving, you're going to be doing just fine, and the extra movement speed goes a long way to help with that. Now, I'm not a tier list guy. In fact, I think tier lists are bad for gaming, and it's bad for people learning how to be good at games. A lot of people think they're helpful, but you don't actually learn anything by using those. So I'm not going to rate any of these builds on a scale like that. That's why you notice that I have not been doing that. I don't think it's a useful thing. I think what's better is for you to see the build in action and decide whether or not it's something that you like to play. Now, if you're the type of person who likes to be extremely safe, and you like to be tactical and maybe hold down a position, maybe you're a fan of playing the arena, then I think that this is a really, really good build to try. I think it's really fun, honestly, just for general clearing purposes, and when it gets set up right, it does a ton of damage to bosses. It's one of the best, most well-rounded builds that they've had for a leveling guide. My real only complaint is that it's not a shaman at all. There's just nothing about it that is shaman-like. I guess that's okay, you gotta work with what you have, and I'm thinking that it would be useful to have some generic builds like that. Like, maybe I just want to be a Primalist, and then I'll figure it out later. Maybe I want to play through the game and never select a specialization. That could be interesting. I don't know if anybody's tried that before. I haven't looked it up, but it would be a fun challenge, wouldn't it? And if I were going to do something like that, this build might be a good one for it. What I didn't notice too much was that my pets were doing anything of value. I know they were. Obviously, they were doing things of value. You just never really notice them happening. So the build ends up feeling like you're just summoning salad and chucking out your totems and having a good time with that. And if that sounds fun to you, it certainly was fun for me. And if you enjoyed watching my hair dry as the video progressed, then go ahead and throw a like on the video and maybe subscribe. I don't know. It's probably a one-time thing. I hope it never happens again. I'll do my best to prevent it. For now, I want to thank you for watching. I have been Rage Panda 1, and I will see you in the next one.